Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another. Welcome to another installment of Chavrusah with Rosh. I'm here just to learn with you as a Chavrusah. The link for the page of Gemara, Sanhedrin Ayin Vav and Beis, you could get from the previous video. I think I posted the link there. So, without further ado, and like I stressed, this is not a prepared shir. We are just learning together in short segments that should be able to keep up and easy to make up. If you fall behind, it's all cataloged. It's all archived on our site. And it's not that we don't do that much per time. So it's easy to keep pace. And if you fall behind, easy to catch up. All right, so if you, but one thing is obvious. You could join in any session and pretty much understand what's going on, for that day. But we frequently discuss issues left hanging from a previous session. So it's really good to keep up and at least prep if you're joining, today. Been better if advanced you would have seen the one before it. Always in general, for whichever one you're going to jump in for, try to at least watch the one right before it, because we often deal with hanging issues, things that we left hanging that still need clarification. All right, but without further ado, we left two issues hanging in our previous session. Right, regarding Rashi, we had two Rashis that we had issues with, and issues with, and not only that, seems to contradict what Rashi himself writes elsewhere. Right? The Roshi was allowed to drink during the Chavrusah Shaf. Rosh privilege. All right. So the, it's Rashi on the Mishnah where Rashi says on Kavash Olav B'mayim, right? So he restrains his friend underwater. And so says Rashi, he holds the person's head and he forces him in the water, so he should, in a manner that he cannot lift up his head. Vininar, and he splashes around v'meis, and he dies. Right? The term vininar seems totally out of place and irrelevant. Unnecessary and irrelevant. Well, you could just say, that looks this way, whether the guy splashed around or not, whether he, temporarily exited the water or not. It's the same halacha. If you hold the guy's head underwater in a manner that he cannot get out of the water, and it's because you're keeping him in a headlock, submerged, that's called first-degree murder. Right? So as Rash says, you held him underwater, right, and he splashed around. Ninar means to splash or stir up, right? V'mei said he died. What does his stirring up have to do with anything? All right, so we raised that question immediately upon reading Rashi because that word v'ninar is indeed a mystery, but it gets even, for lack of a better way of saying it, worse. That we see that Rashi himself did not really view that word as necessary because this Gemara is quoted elsewhere, this Mishnah rather, in Baba Kama Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. So this Mishnah is referenced, right? Right, right. If you restrain a person in the fire or in the water, right, and he cannot get out of there because of you, right, and he dies, chayiv, you are liable, right? So Rashi says on that, explaining our Mishnah that's quoted here in Baba Kama, right? Kavshav shetakfo sham ad shemes. He just holds him there until he dies, right? That's what he says. He holds him there until he dies. It's pretty simple, right? That's all. Right? It sufficed for Rashi and Baba Kama, right? Why does it not suffice for Rashi over here in right in Sanhedrin? No, and I don't right now. I don't have an approach on this. I really do not have an approach on this, and my next approach will be to check other girsos of Rashi to see if perhaps there was a copyist error. Whether perhaps the word veninar, right, was inserted by mistake. That's my next step where I'm going to go as far as doing my own research. And then we'll look around the Mefarshim also, right? All right, so that I do not have an approach to this Rashi, especially when you see it, Rashi himself was willing to do without this, seemingly superfluous and misleading word veninar when he explains this Mishnah when it's quoted in Baba Kama. Okay? And then there was another thing, right? That the almost it's virtually a stira in Rashi, but on this I thought I may have an approach on this. Right? So Rashi talking about the machlokas Rabbi and Rabbanan, that when you use a snake to kill a person, that you bring the snake to the person's hand, and the snake, as a result of being brought in proximity to the person, very close proximity, kills the person. Now, so Rabbi Yehuda holds that's called first-degree murder, for reasons that we're going to learn in the Gemara, and the Rabban hold no, it's grama. So Rashi by us, we said last time, we pointed out, right, says, right, heshich, he causes, right, he causes the snake to bite the guy. So Rashi says, sha'achas anochash biyado, he takes the nachash in hand, volicho, and he walks him there, vigia, and he reaches, shine anochash Maush brings the teeth, the fangs of the snake to the hand of his friend. Put the Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan. This is a machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan, and the Gemara will explain, what this machlokas is, right? So in this case of Maush bringing the fangs into direct contact with the skin of the guy, right? It's Rabbi Yehuda considers that first-degree murder and gets the death penalty, and the Rabbanan say no, that's potter. It's a grama, right? Like a grama. It's the snake did it, not the guy, right? So now Rashi says over here, some, two first seemingly, something which is didn't have to mention. He walked the snake over, right? I get it. He's the one holding the head of the snake. Otherwise, there'd be no reason they should be liable. So obviously, he's the one holding the snake, right? So, but was it v'holicho? And he walked it to him, right? And then he also put the teeth of the snake, the fangs, in direct contact, with the skin. Okay, all good and well. The part that's like irrelevant is, or superfluous is holicho, and he walked the snake over. If I say he held the head of the snake and put the fangs in contact with the skin. Now it was v'holicho, and he walked it. Okay. But we saw from the Musaf Rashi on the side that Rashi, didn't explain it exactly the same way when this Gemara also is quoted earlier in Baba Kama in the Chav Gimel Beis, right? So Toshma, Gemara is bringing a ride from our Mishnah, right? He caused a snake to bite him, right? Rabbi Yehuda considers it first-degree murder and gets the death penalty, and Chacham calls only gram ritzicha, only, like we explained in our first session, only means misa bidei shamayim. There is no mutter way that doesn't get death in the hands of the heavenly court that you could kill a person, right? A lot of people would have done it if there were to be a way, it would be mutter. Never mutter. Just the question. All these questions of potter or chayav or potter is only whether he gets killed by Bezdin or it gets left up to a Kodesh Baruch Hu to do. Okay. So Rashi says over here, Hishach Balth Nachash, right? Describing the case. Shnotos Nachash Piyodo. He says very simple. He took the Nachash by hand. Vigia Piv Liad Chaver. He puts the mouth near his friend's mouth. Ashich Solatocho, to the point that the hand went into the mouth of the snake. The snake bit him, v'meis, and he died. Let's look how Rashi says over here. Much simpler, right? Not with walking the snake over, and not only that, Rashi, made it that Rabbi Yehuda would even be mechayev, even if he didn't actually bring the fangs to the skin, but just close enough that his buddy's hand is in the snake's mouth. Right? So I do believe we said in our last session, right, that the way Rashi explains in Baba Kama, the Rabbanim make more sense because it's still the snake's choice to, bite him, right? And the because all the guy did was put the guy's hand in the snake's mouth, right? So the Rabbanan is easier to understand the way Rashi spells it out over here in Baba Kama, right? Rabbi Yehuda is the easier one to understand the way he spells it out in Sanhedrin because we're talking about putting the fangs in direct contact, with the guy's skin. And that's already, the one that's harder to understand in that description of the scenario. Right? Right. The one that's hard to understand in that scenario is the Rabbanan, that is still potter. Right? There's like a real base marriage setting, a lot of background noise. Anyways, so I'll tell you what I was thinking about this. Of course, I'd be curious to see if there are other girsos to Rashi by us. Again, Rashi is, complicates things. But I think something occurred to me. The machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan is an Iser scenario. In both cases, that the way obviously. Right. I'm not going to say that there's actually steer in Rashi. I'm going to say that this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan was pretty broad. When is that where the Rabbanan, will say it's the snake that did it, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's the guy that did it, and there's like a certain latitude to this case that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan are arguing. They're not arguing dafka in a very, very, very specific instance of how the guy brought the snake so close to the person, right? It's it's even if you put the fangs on the skin, right? And it's even if you didn't really put the fangs in, but you did, bring it close enough that the hand is in the mouth. They have the machlokes equally in both cases. And I think it's what Rashi wanted to prove. Right, Rashi took the liberty in Baba Kama, I am suggesting, of showing how far Rabbi Yehuda goes in his, making the human being who held the snake liable. Look how far he goes. Right, that the snake, he doesn't say holicho. I didn't say he walked the snake over. The snake may have already been close to the guy anyway. This is what I want to say. I want to say that Rashi, I should just say the punchline and then work the details. I want to say that the way Rashi explained the case in Baba Kama, he wanted to explain it to show how far Rabbi Yehuda goes, right? To put the liability for first-degree murder on the guy, on the human being. And I want to say that Rashi by us in Sanhedrin wants to show how far the Rabbanan go, that they let the guy off the hook and pin it on the snake, right? Reb Yehuda and Rabbanan argue in this scenario and in this scenario, both in the Sanhedrin scenario, the way Rashi paints it, and in the Bava Kama scenario. There was a wide case, man attacking other man using snake. It was a wide file with multiple scenarios, and Rashi wanted to show how far this goes. So in the case in Bava Kama, he wants to show how far Reb Yehuda goes to put the responsibility on a human being. So he doesn't say V'holicho, right, that he walked the snake over. Mashma, the snake was already close to the guy. The snake was already, let's say, a short distance away. So one could argue the snake could have gotten him anyway, right? And even so, and so the guy just brought the snake closer. Didn't even dig the fangs in. He just put the hand of the guy into the mouth. Brought the snake so close that the guy's hand wound up in the snake's mouth, and didn't even directly put the fangs into the flesh of the guy, into direct contact with the flesh of the guy. So that's how far Reb Yehuda goes to put the liability for murder on the guy. The snake was already close, and one could argue the snake could have gotten to him anyway without any help from the man, right? And he didn't even put the fangs in direct contact with the flesh, and still Reb Yehuda says chayev, right? Because that involvement of just making it a little bit closer, right? Snake was already close, but it made closer to the point that the hand was in the mouth. That's enough to make the guy, liable for murder one. Right? That's how Rashi said in Bava Kama to show the extreme that Rebbe Yehuda goes to. By us, he wants to show the extreme that the Rabbanon go to, that it's the snake that killed the guy. And I think that's what Rashi means to say. So it even starts off with, he grabbed, say, V'holicho, he walked it over. Because, one could make the argument the snake could have never reached the guy in the first place. The snake was far away. So it's the guy. The snake was already far away, right? And if not for the intervention of the human being, right? If not, the snake would have never reached him. So it should be the human being's fault. And furthermore, not only did he make the snake close, the snake itself was far away, but he even put the fangs in direct contact with the flesh. And still the Rabbanan pater. And therefore, I'll tell you what Vol is, since the Rashi is coming with the agenda, in a way he writes by us, to show how far the Rabbanan go in letting the guy off the hook and putting it all on the snake. Right, so that's why I say, V'holicho, that this particular snake was far away from the guy. So again, there's no reason to say the snake would have gotten to him anyway. The human being is the one that walked the snake over from far away. And not only that, he walked him so close that, and brought him so close to the guy's hand that the fangs were in contact with the flesh. And still, after all that, the Rabbanan still say pater. So Reb Yehuda and Rabbanan argue in both cases. In Bava Kama, he just wants to show you the extreme that Reb Yehuda goes to put it on the guy, even though you might think it should be on the snake, right? And over by us, the extremes that the Rabbanan are going to let the guy off the hook in the hands of the earthly court and put it on the snake. The snake is the one that killed him, right? Right. Even though in the way it's spelled out, you might think over here, well, he made the snake, the snake would have never reached him if not for this guy. The snake was far away. He walked it over, and he brought the fangs there, and still the Rabbanan pater. That's why I think is a very realistic approach, that it's not a contradiction in Rashi. Right, because the halacha, they argue in both cases equally. I would endeavor to say, I think it's reasonable to say. In Bava Kama, we want to show you what we say it's putting Gemara talk in Bava Kama lo diacha kocho de Rebbe Yehuda, to show you how far Rebbe Yehuda goes to put the liability on the man, even though you would have thought not that way, right? And by us, it's lo dia kocho de Rabbanan, how much they pater the man. No matter how much his involvement was critical to have made this snake attack possible. That's what I think, and I'm pretty happy with that. But we will continue to look around. Yeah. Okay. So now, let's just go a little bit weiter. We're still in the Mishnah. Now we'll see what we come up with. I always do the Pirush HaMishnayos of the Rambam. The Rambam, says in his Hakdamah to the Pirush HaMishnayos that a way to get a good Hakdamah to what the Gemara says is to learn his Pirush HaMishnayos. It's a good intro to whatever the Gemara is going to say. He writes that as one of the things you get out of his Pirush HaMishnayos. Because he says his agenda is to superimpose the Gemara on the Mishnah. So, and of course, we're going to learn the Piskei Rambam, and it's a good way to understand where the Rambam's coming from if we see what else the Rambam writes about the topic. All right. So, not always does the Rambam have a lot to say. It depends. All right. So let's just see the Pirush HaMishnayos. I like using this edition from HaMaor. It's a more contemporary trade. Ram wrote the Pirush HaMishnayos in Arabic. All right, the classical is Ibn Tibon. Ibn Tibon's language is very heavy. So in more recent history, Rav Yosef Kapach did it, and I grew up on that version. But more recently, Rav Korach from Bnei Brak redid it. He was also Yemenite, like Rav Kapach, also was able to read the Rambam in the original Arabic and translate it. And this version also has the Yeshiva charade on the bottom. All right, which, it's best not to look at until after you've done your own research. All right, so so let's see what he says. All right. So he says, Shisabo, right? When he incites the dog or the snake, everyone agrees a incitement, like Sikkim. Everyone agrees that the animal is the one that did it, not the human being. Shalom is also about Chaim, Biaro, Bakol. You give a signal to that animal. That everyone agrees, say Sikkim, right? That you didn't, with your own body bring the animal to the human being, right? But rather you say Sikkim. You use a code word, that your trained dog went out and killed, right? That's not murder one. That's called, Gram Retzicha, and that everyone agrees to. Right? Rabbi and Rabban only disagreed when the man, physically brings the snake to the person. That's where they had their machlokes, and dafka by a snake, as we're going to learn, right? So, but Shisa, when you just incite, like say Sikkim, as Ram says, you give a signal to animal, either with your hands or with a sound. And you cause the animal to take control over the human being. All right. V'hishich. So now listen, now the case that we were talking about. Hishich. Right. You actually cause the snake to bite the person, which is the machlokes rabban. Sheposech pi also balei chaim. He opens up the mouth of this creature. Right. Right, umadbik shinov begufo, and sticks the teeth of the animal onto the guy's body. All right, so the Rambam comes from a slightly different, both Rashi in both places talked about walking the snake over. Right, the Rambam, it says, well, your involves that you cause the snake to open his mouth, and then you stick the fangs into the flesh of the person. I don't think there's a real machlokas here. The bottom line is, well, whether you brought the snake close or whether you caused the snake to open his mouth, same difference of the human being involved to facilitate the snake attack. That's what I think. But I see, right, that there is a... So first the Rambam always jumps to the Rambam, that looks like Chachamim in all the cases of the Mishnah, right? So there's some cases in the Mishnah as it's written in the Mishnah that we haven't gotten to because the Gemara divides it up. All right, so the Rambam always, another thing that he does, he always paskins the final halacha also for us, based on how he feels the Gemara ruled. Okay, but I see there's a... Right. Okay. The the comment that he brings below is, it's more nogea for when we actually do the Gemara on this case in the Mishnah. Okay, one more thing that we'll do for today, as we like to keep these sessions short, that way hopefully everyone will stick with it, right, is, there is the Rishon on Sanhedrin. There's, there's certain Masechtas that have special Rishonim, right? Like on Kiddusha, we have the Shita Lono Dalami, right? That's where the action is. There's also Ma'arit on Kiddusha. It's like every Masechta has like its special, Rishonim. That sadly we don't have them on other Masechtas, so we have to take full advantage when we do have them. So on Baba Basra and Sanhedrin, we have Yad Ramah, Rav Meir Halevi Abulafia. That's a very early Rishon in Spain, roughly a contemporary of the Rambam, a younger contemporary of the Rambam. He lived slightly after the Rambam. I think he was before the Ramban even, judging by, he quotes the Rambam, even the Rambam's later works, but he doesn't quote the Ramban. So I'm under the understanding that the Ramban was young in his time. So Rameir Alevi Abulafia, the Yad Ramah, he is the Rishon. He wrote extensively on Baba Basra, and he wrote on Sanhedrin. I do believe that Machon Ofek, found this stuff on Kiddushin. It's a very good, all Rishonim are good, but when you learn Baba Basra, everyone's got to have a Yad Ramah. Right. Another thing you have to have when you learn Baba Basra is Rabbeinu Yoina. We have so much Rabbeinu Yoina on Baba Basra we don't have on any other Masechta. It's like, Baba Basra, it's Yad Ramah and Rabbeinu Yoina are like the Rishonim. Anyone in Yeshiva knows this. And so when you learn Sanhedrin, it's a Yad Ramah Masechta. Right? All right. So we have to take advantage and do the Yad Ramah religiously, whether we find a Chiddush there or not. So I'm reading from the Yad Ramah on our Mishnah. Ve'eloin hanerogin, these are the ones that get herek. Slug minisrafin, this Mishnah is coming after, Eloin hanisrafin. And first, the rogin la suke arba mitzvahs, the tanilu mikar perak arba mitzvahs, because we have to, as it were, Rebbe in an earlier Mishnah, promised to discuss the halachos of all the arba misos bezdin, as per Perek Arba Misos, right? And so we're fulfilling this agenda of, he mentions that there are 4 Misos, Perek Arba Misos, and then in the later Mishnayos, he goes back for the details of each and every of those 4 Misos. So it's time to get to Hereg. Now it's called Neherogim because Stam Hariga, when we use that term, it means with the sword. As we said already earlier in Perek Arba Misas, Mitzvah Rogim, right? The Mitzvah of Nerogim, which means to kill by the sword, is as is recapped in our Mishnah. That is, the murderer gets a hereg, as do the people of a city convicted of being Irani Dachas, that most of them served Avodah Zarah. The city is killed out by the sword when it gets the status of a Irani Dachas. So Irani Dachas, how do we know Irani Dachas gets killed out by the sword? Because it says, the Fi Cherev, wipe out the city by the sword. So that's pretty straightforward. The pasuk says in black on white. Now by a murderer, the death penalty for murder is also death by the sword. How do we know that? So Gabe Abdo Nakri Nakem. So now the first time we found the death penalty by murder is in Parshas Mishpatim, where if a person kills his Eved Kanani, and the Eved Kanani dies, within 24 hours, right? So he is to be the slave is to be avenged. Nakom Yenakim, right? Avenge the slave. Right? That's what the pasuk says. V'otzi l'kimazu. Vitania, we learned to the Bryce of the Kimazu, and you're the Amai. So the Bryce says, well, this being avenged, I don't know what that is. No, so the pasuk says elsewhere. Hashem says, I will bring upon you a sword of vengeance. Oh, so vengeance means the sword. Ashkan Eved Ben Chorban. Okay, so we know that avenging means the sword, but that was said when a man kills his Eved Kanani, right? How do you know that a free man, you kill a free Jew, that it also gets the, death by the sword? Kal v'chomer. Well, that's simple. We don't have a kal v'chomer. Katav v'sai ben chorim b'chanek. Like, what are you going to say, right? Well, or kill your fellow Jew, you should get a lesser penalty and death by strangulation, which is less stringent than death by the sword. Look, if you kill a man's property, right? A man killed his own property. Right, he gets death by the sword. If you kill your fellow full-fledged Jew, you should get a lower death. That's impossible, right? So it can't be less than death by the sword, right? Now, Raja Misas, right? Right, it's all explained in Arba Misas, and of course, we can't learn for a Kav Chomer go up. We say, a Kav Chomer only teaches us that what we minimally know should certainly be true. We can't make a Kav Chomer to invent that you should get a higher Misa. That's what's called Dayola Vod Minadin Lios Kenidon. Right? You have to, you're going to use a Kav Chomer to prove that which we know also applies over here. Right? So if it's a Kav Chomer, a free Jew can't be treated less than a slave. So if a slave gets saved, so for sure the Jew gets saved. Can't use the Kav Chomer to speculate about a more stringent punishment. The Kav Chomer is limited just to proving what we know. Also, certainly applies here, but we can't speculate on more. All right, but it's a Kav Chomer to say certainly not less. Okay, right. So, this is all spelled out in that sugya in Parakah Misas. Okay, so now we get back to our Mishnah. The way explained. Rotzach shikas for Eu be'even o be'egrof, a murderer that hit his friend with a stone or with his fist, because or he holds him underwater. Right? Koloimar, that means say afbishu mutumayim. The chiddush over here is that even though he was already in the water, he was already in the fire, kamachem prior to this person, restraining him there. Kevan Shebaz, since he comes there and he forces him to stay there, he cannot get out of that situation. From the time that you're forcing him there, you're chayiv. Right? So, the chiddush over here is that I'm not the one who put him underwater. I'm not the one who put him in the fire. I'm just the one who's not letting him leave. And that's enough, for me to... God forbid, for the person who did that, for a person who did that, to be guilty of murder one. Right? But if he pushed him, so the Mishnah goes on, right, that he pushed him into the water, he pushed him in the fire, but the guy could exit, he just didn't. Sefer Nami Ravusa Kamashman, the Sefer, of pushing him in, and the guy could leave. I'm not forcing him to stay there, he just didn't. Right? And so I walk. Right, the person who did that walks. He's not guilty of first-degree murder, even though he put him there, because the guy could have easily exited. He could have exited, and he just didn't. Right, so it's not called first-degree murder. So now this sefer is also teaching us a chiddush. Right? So now the sefer is also teaching us a chiddush, that even though he was outside of the water and outside of the fire, and I'm the one who put him there, because you might think that should make me guilty of murder one. No, but since he was able to leave the situation that I put him in, and he didn't, I'm potter. But he adds a word of explanation. The lav giri didei ahanube. My arrow had no effect on him. My arrow had no effect on him. Giri didei ahanube. My arrow had no effect, meaning there is direct causation. I'm going to put him in the water. I'm going to put him into the fire. I'm the one who did it. It's called gira. It's called my arrow. It's my force. But it's not what killed him. It's not what killed him. Because since he could have left, it's not called that I gave him a death blow. So it sounds like from the Lashon of the Ramah, it's not called grama in the normative sense, because there is direct causation. Why is he in the fire? I put him there. Why is he in the water? I put him there. All right, I put him there by pushing him there. It's direct cause. That's called my arrow, as it were. But lo hanibe, it's not what really caused his death. right? Because he could have escaped from the situation I put him in. So it sounds like it's kind of like hitting a guy. A weakling hits a guy and the guy drops dead. As the Gemara is going to say that we estimate there was direct blow, but was that direct blow with lethal force, or is it called that he died by a freak accident? Right. So of course it's direct causation. It doesn't have shiur misa. It doesn't have the requisite amount of force to be called a death blow. It's a direct blow, but not a death blow. Right. So that's what he's saying is the reason why the guy's potter, his ability to get out of the water I pushed him into, or get out of the fire that I pushed him into, makes it that my arrow, my direct causation, my shot is not a death blow. There's direct causation, but this direct causation cannot be considered to be the real reason why he's dead, because he could have saved himself from it. So it's not grum in a normative sense where there's an intermediary force. No intermediary force, but it's called that my force was not, there was a direct blow, but not a death blow. Because he could have survived it if he would have taken he was able to get out of there. He could have survived it. That sounds like the Patur's midin, that there wasn't shiur misa, the way the Ramah is explaining it. And we'll go back, we'll see whether, all the Rishonim would agree with that. Right? She's supposed to come. She's supposed to also now, if he incites the dog or incites the snake, where everyone agrees, you're potter, right? Because you didn't physically bring the animal to the human being, just gave a signal, sicked him on him, but that was it. So everyone, even Rabbi Yehuda, agrees you're potter. She's a lashon gira. It's to incite. So potter, that's called potter. Grumba. This is grumma, right? Because there's a secondary cause. I triggered, like a liberal, triggered the animal, and the animal got triggered, right? And and attacked the person. This over here says grumma balmud. This is indeed grumma, and because it's a secondary cause, right? There's meaning I am only a secondary cause for the guy's death. The direct cause was the animal in between. Right, so over here he says grumma ba'alma, as opposed to the case before of pushing a guy in the water, but the guy could get out. That's not called grumma. That's called lav gire didei hanube. There was direct cause. I'm the one who put him in the water, but it's not called that. I dealt him a death blow. I dealt him a direct blow, but not a death blow, because he could have survived it. He could have gotten out of there. But having the dog in the middle, that's called grumma. That's called grumma. Now, what we've been dealing with all day long. Right? If he makes the snake actually bite him, which is the machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan, right? So the way he says it, shachas rosho shel nachash, he grabs the head of the snake, and he sticks the teeth into the flesh of his friend. Again, roughly like the way Rashi says it in Baba Kama. The way Rashi says it by us, roughly, just he leaves out the v'holicho. And we said that Rashi put in just to show you that maybe you would have said, well, the snake was far away, so it's really my strike, because this snake could have never reached him. All right, still, even adding that factor, still, the Rabbanan would pater. But my plea again, the Gemara is going to explain what they argue. Okay, we went a little bit overtime over our regular up to half an hour session, but hopefully you found it geschmack. And yeah, I didn't give a, prepared share, because as we said, this is a Chavrusah shaf, but this is also the best way to get a person's derech in learning, because you see the steps that he takes, to analyze and discover clues and subsequently put them together. All right. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I'm recording this on a Thursday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and of course, a good Shabbos.